Porcupine Tree. You've heard me talk about these guys a good bit throughout the coverkillernation life cycle. You've heard me talk about Steven Wilson, their principal brainchild, even more. How exactly I can cram a career such as theirs into just a couple of minutes is beyond me, but I'm going to give it my all. I'm going to give it my best. This is my band review for Porcupine Tree. It's a career that really started as a complete and total joke. Steven Wilson was recording a lot of his own music and basically crafted a fake band. And that fake band actually ended up becoming Porcupine Tree. That was in the late 80s. In the early 1990s, we saw the first recordings kind of get to disc with albums such as On the Sunday of Life. Synesthesia was one of the very first tracks that I heard off of Up the Downstair. And it's just something that, if this is the first song that you ever heard from Porcupine Tree, if this is the first thing that Porcupine Tree really, presented you with, if you were a fan back then, saw this fresh face called Porcupine Tree and hadn't heard their earliest recordings off of one of the compilations which they've been assembled on, and Synesthesia was the first song that you heard, that would be enough proof to know that you were in for one hell of a wild ride. That combination of electronics along with just breathtaking beat, with just soft harmonic voice, Steven really showcased why this band was going to be one to watch. Throughout the entire Up the Downstair album, the one thing that you really got was a large amount of variety. You could definitely tell his prog rock genius, but you could also tell that he was a fan of electronic music. He was basically just a fan of music in general. He just loved writing, and this was something that was going to become a huge part of his life, as was psychedelic drugs. But because of the psychedelics, we got an album such as Voyage 34, which is completely ambient, if you really wanted to call it that. You could even give it a little bit more of a techno designation, or a trance designation. This is basically just chronicling an individual on a psychological substance, and it's fantastic. It's beautifully done. It chronicles the highs and lows. Now, these are highs and lows that I myself have never experienced personally. However, if it's any representation in musical form, then, well, where's the LSD at? I'm kidding, of course. Throughout the 1990s, Steven Wilson also started to assemble a bit of a band, and we got, because of this, albums such as The Sky Moves Sideways, in order to, just to name a few, and of course we started to hear the initial birth rights of other side projects of Steven Wilson as well, such as The Incredible Expanding Mindfuck, which is a little bit more toward the electronic side. Of course, eventually we would also see No Man, which was a collaboration that he was able to have that explored the more the ambient, the more ambitious side of his mind, really, along with a couple of other collaborators, and of course eventually we would have Blackfield, which would be a little bit more directed towards pop, but you would almost consider it to be a companion project to Porcupine Tree, as opposed to it being completely its own independent project. That's considering they seem to share a lot of different qualities, with the exception of Blackfield really being a little bit softer, a little bit more in the way of dreamy and romantic, whereas and really romantic is the best word that I could use there, considering some of this stuff is just depressing. Whereas with Porcupine Tree, you instead got a lot of that trippiness, that ambient, that atmospheric feeling to you, but you had a little bit more in the way of a rock vein, a little bit more of that prog rock sensibility. With albums such as The Sky Moves Sideways, you just got a huge combination of everything just thrust together. You have, the prog rock side mixing with that techno-y, that transy side, that real ambient atmospheric side, in order to create mammoth tracks. And this is an album that I compare a lot to an album like Wish You Were Here by Pink Floyd, because it really it has these two long bookends that really serve as part one and part two of the principal idea, The Sky Moves Sideways, and then you have the rest of the album embodied, kind of the meat and the vegetables, the condiments of this Sky Moves Sideways sandwich. Now, as time moved on, there was a little bit more of a move toward a little bit more conventional a rock. The elements that you heard on The Sky Moves Sideways and Voyage 34 started to dissipate a little bit. Instead, it seemed like it was going a little bit more towards a classical rock/pop sound, with progressive sides and progressive tendencies still abound everywhere, considering Steven really could never get that far away from it. The one thing that really broke through for this band, the one thing that really caused a lot of attention for this band, came in the early part of the 2000s, and surprisingly enough, even though I'd rather say that I was there from the start, it was actually this album that broke through and brought Porcupine Tree to really very, very many houses and very, very many people. Incenzia. Incenzia was the Porcupine Tree album that actually took this prog rock, prog metal sensibility and really amplified that metal side. There were big soaring guitars. Steven's soft voice still resonated very well. This was an opus, one that really just defied all law that many people were used to listening to at this time. But whenever they heard a song such as Trains or Gravity Eyelids or The Sound of Music, it's something that captivated you. It's something that really brought upon just this feeling of unexplored territory. You're not sure where this is going to go, but you know that you want to take the journey because it just seems so damn worth it. Steven Wilson captivates you by making music sound worth exploring, as opposed to with many other artists that you perhaps listen to every single day that are new, where you listen to the song, think, hey, that was pretty cool, but would I really want to do that 12 other times? Steven Wilson makes you want to do it, however many other times there are on the album, considering there's just something really unique about it. Something very, very unique and one of a kind about his delivery, about his presentation, that makes you want to listen to more Porcupine Tree. Deadwing followed after that, which was another successful album that kind of continued a little bit more in that metallic vein, though not nearly quite as much as Incenzia. But another album that serves as a gateway drug for this band is Fear of a Blank Planet. And this album is just phenomenal. It was really, really hard to imagine whenever this album was first heard by myself that these guys were putting some of their best albums out, this late into their career, kind of where they've already, overhauled their career a bit and gone with this whole prog rock / metal idea, as opposed to just sticking primarily with prog rock or conventional rock. And at this point, I'd been very well versed in their discography, so I knew of the genius of The Sky Moves Sideways. I had known about Up the Downstair. I had known about Lightbulb Sun. And Lightbulb Sun was actually it was my AOL Instant Messenger name for a while. Only it was Son of a Light Bulb, which I got it from there. So I was aware of it all, but Fear of a Blank Planet just took everything to another planet. Now, of course, their last album that they released, The Incident, was a conceptual album that was basically one song split into multiple parts. And then, of course, we had the other, sort of like the B-sides on disc number 2. And, of course, there's a famous fiasco whenever I initially reviewed that album. I was the Bonnie the Cat hater because I originally didn't like that song very much. But upon recent revisitation, I do enjoy that song a lot more than I think I did whenever the album first was released. These guys are just fantastic. And right now they are on a hiatus, and it's unclear whether or not there's going to be another Porcupine Tree album in the future. Steven Wilson is off doing his solo albums, and has been doing that now for a couple of years. Grace for Drowning was released a couple years back, 2011. And, of course, we had The Raven That Refuses to Sing and Other Stories here in 2013, which really gets to... It gives Steven a lot of freedom, and I think that's one thing that may have happened with Porcupine Tree's rapid ascent in the 2000s, was that all of a sudden you almost have to start playing standard songs. You have to start playing certain songs that everybody really recognizes. And not that there's anything wrong with that, and not that I think that Steven has any, issue with that. But you want the freedom and the ability to continue to explore, which is the reason why he's kept a lot of side projects and does a lot of production work as well. He's done the production work for a couple of Opeth albums. Of course, he and Michael were a part of Storm Corrosion 1 year ago in 2012, a project that had been ongoing for a long period of time. He's also done production work for a band that we'll be talking about a little bit later on today, Orphan Land. He was the producer, or one of the producers, of the Never Ending Way of a Warrior. So Porcupine Tree. Really, whenever you think about where to start, it's really not a question of where to start. The real question is, where will it actually end? And that's the thing. I hope it never does. I hope this band continues to make music. I hope that Steven decides to put the band back together one of these days, and they make some more music together. There's a lot of great material out there. There's a wealth of it. There's a lot of live versions out there. And I'm sure that there's a lot of things that remain unreleased that Steven could release. This band is like LSD. Well, not really. But this band is like cigarettes or any drug that has a high tolerance level or, a high addiction rate. They are very addicting. They're a band that's very hard to stop listening to. And as always, they're a huge recommendation on the Cover Killer Nation channel. So check them out.